Well, coming up at the JFL Northwest, he's got a pair of shows called the Alternative Show coming up on Friday, February 24th and 25th next week at the Rio Theatre. Get your popcorn ready, people, at 10:30 showtimes on both the 24th and 25th. The one, the only, the legendary Andy Kindler joins us here. And Andy, welcome. Welcome. Thanks so much for doing this.
Well, I'm glad to be back, or I'm glad to be still going.
Okay, so tell me this. Are you just performing here in Vancouver, or are you actually moving to Canada like so many people promised after last fall's election?
It is really terrible what's happening here. There's no way to sugarcoat it, So I hopefully we'll all be alive by next week, so I can do those shows. And but I'm not counting on anything. It's really I can't stop focusing on him just being impeached. So that's how we hope it'll happen.
Hey, tell
me
this.
It drains the life out of you.
Well, okay, so tell me, you are like the original gangster of Trump roasting. There was, Comedy Central even kind of gave you kudos to that last summer. They tweeted out a link. Almost 10 years ago, you were basically cracking on Donald Trump. What was it that you saw at the time that basically the rest of the world is now seeing unfold?
Well, there were a couple of things. I mean, that was for the Root of All Evil, which was that Louis Black show.
Yeah.
And what happened was that he's just one of those guys who, I'm from New York, so I've known about him for a long time, and he just always, seemed to me to be such a clown that I never took him seriously. And, the truth, I've been talking about this in my act, the truth is that my dad, who was a plumbing and heating contractor, he actually had Donald Trump as a client. He said he was the worst. He never paid his bill. You had to hector him. He's just a conniving chiseler. So, and we bought my dad once the Art of the Deal board game as a joke, and he was like, why'd you get this for me? I was like, well, it's a joke. And then the next day we're like, yeah, why did we get it for him? He hates Donald Trump. What was the point? And I've been saying in the act that the only good news is that my dad passed away in December of 2015. So thank God he didn't have to be here to see this.
Yeah. Well, oh man. So would he literally be rolling in his grave then, knowing this?
He is. I assume he's rolling in his grave now, and people still for some reason, I guess most comedians don't talk about death, because I get a lot of silence from that, at which point I say, my dad would have wanted me to do weak material about his passing.
I don't want to be laughing at the passing of your dad for just over a year ago.
Oh, that's probably what it is, that people don't want to be laughing. Well, that would be terrible if I turned on the crowd. What are you laughing at? Well, you just made a joke. Oh, okay. I get you.
You guys are a bunch of cold SOBs. How dare you? Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and in fairness to your Art of the Deal joke that you tried to hand over your dad with the board game, I guess it's fair to say that family can sometimes be your toughest critics, right?
Yes. I don't know. My family... we kind of all share the same sense of humor. So actually my family's been very supportive. When I was trying to be a musician, my family was less – they weren't yelling at me to stop, but close.
So is this the best time to be alive from a comedic standpoint with the material? I look at the daily shows and how news has become, satire, and how so many people get their news and information from shows like Colbert and The Daily Show and John Oliver, and you've contributed in so many different levels with that sort of form as well. But Saturday Night Live feels more relevant than it's ever been in probably 10, 15 years as a result of what we're seeing unfold with Donald Trump as the president. So is this a great time to be alive from a comedic standpoint or not?
I think it's great in terms of that it just it's almost like the whole concept of why Jews are funny and black people are funny. It's like, when you've been oppressed or you've had so much negative stuff happen to you, it brings out the comedy. So I think that's definitely true. But it doesn't feel comfortable because he's the first president in my lifetime that I've actually been. Even Nixon, I wasn't scared like this guy because Nixon at least had some concepts in his head. But Saturday Night Live, I mean, the stuff that Melissa McCarthy did, I mean, that's the greatest thing. I think it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And of course, they on the one hand, Lorne Michaels allowed them. Lorne Michaels should never be forgiven for allowing Trump to host the show when he was running for president. So in a lot of ways, Lorne Michaels helped elect him. But I think the comics and the writers in that show are just really really killing it. It's just so great.
Well, and how they've done it, and for so many years, I think it feels like for people for the last few years up until this particular year or so, people have been saying, "Oh, it's time to say sayonara to SNL." I think that's cyclical when you got a cast change, but to bring in heavyweights like Alec Baldwin, who's done look, I mean, he's just been brilliant with Donald Trump, and the Melissa McCarthy element with Spicer, it's been way too much fun. It's brilliant. Exactly to your point, it might be one of some of the best stuff we've seen in years.
Yeah, it really is. And the thing about the show is that they happen to have just amazing women on the show, and Kate McKinnon is so funny in every. And the thing I like Melissa McCarthy and Kate McKinnon. The thing I was just amazed at is how much they seem to just enjoy what they were doing. That's the part that they're just having so much fun doing comedy, which is a novel idea.
Hey, tell me, yeah, what a revelation! Tell me this. You touched on how so many Jews being funny and black people being funny. Is it easier to be a minority in comedy than in today's day and age? Because it's such a politically correct world that it feels like comedy should be the escape, but man, people get upset over everything. And I'm sure you've probably heard things in a case of generationally what was acceptable at one time, say even 15 years ago, is now like, oh, wait, watch out.
Well, some of it's just the way society progresses. I mean, years ago, there was a joke when I was a kid that I heard. I didn't even know what the joke meant. It was like, "Hey, nice to see you back in men's clothes." So it's like I think there was a time period where you could make fun of where comics made fun of, say, transgendered people, because it was people didn't even know anybody transgendered.
Sure.
So I think once something becomes like, okay, well, this is an actual thing, I think it's not so bad sometimes that you outgrow it. It's like doing really. I watch some comedy from the 80s or the 70s, and you see some of the anti-gay jokes. And it's not like that, we should remove it from history, but they don't quite. They are kind of based on a certain amount of anger in a way. And then, of course, you always have someone like Rickles. You have, this. It's a very. You can't make any rules with comedy because some people are just great at saying the most insulting things ever, and some people use the ability to say insulting things to be terrible. Like Bill Maher. Like, I can't stand his anti-Muslim stuff. So it's like I'm not against him having freedom of speech, but also it's freedom of speech for people to say I don't like that bit. So it's kind of a complicated issue. It's like I think definitely political correctness can go too far, but I also think it can be just used as a weapon to say things that are nasty.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fair point. I mean, you look at some of those comedy roasts. You touched on some of the homophobic jokes. I think back to Eddie Murphy. His Raw stand-up 30 years ago, going back to 1987. And people were killing themselves laughing. But, man, I mean, I remember watching that just a couple of years ago thinking to myself, my goodness, imagine a comedian doing, saying and talking like that in today's day and age. Even in a comedic platform, you'd be under so much fire.
Right, absolutely, no question about it. It's a weird thing, and also the idea that happens on Twitter a lot is someone will say something and then it gets blown up. They didn't even mean to say it or something like that, and then your whole career could be affected by that. It's like crazy. So
is it harder or easier to be a comedian now than when you first broke in?
I think it's better because I think that some of the things like just take somebody like Ellen DeGeneres not being able to say she was gay. So like that was people had to hide their sexuality, and now I think I see so many different comics of different races and ethnicities. I think that's really positive.
You're performing here in Vancouver coming up in just a few days from now, and talk to me about what we can expect to see from today's day and age, an Andy Kindler show, the alternative show, if you will, that's being described here for JFL Northwest.
Well, I've been doing the show for a long time up in Montreal. I did the alternative show back when there wasn't that much alternative comedy. It was like in the late '90s,
Sure.
And so it was like a kind of needed to do the show. People kind of make fun of the name in a way now because it really is, and it's bad for my business because my business is mocking bad comedy. But there is less bad comedy now, and there's more people who are more alternative now. So I probably don't even need to. But it just became an idea of like that's the name of the show, so it kind of stuck that way. I love hosting. I just really love. To me, when I started, and I saw people even before I started comedy, and you'd see people like Richard Belzer,
yeah.
and they would totally be in charge of the show, and the show would be like their show, and so that's what I try and do. I try and do material in between, and then although it's still amazed by the fact that when you go up in between comics and you're hosting a show, the crowd still gives you a look like they're shocked that you're back again. I have to keep saying, why would you people? I mean, there's that little look of like, well, what's he? Wasn't he already here? So
he's having another cigarette on stage. What? What's his problem? So you also have coming up in just a couple weeks' time on March 3rd, you have the season 4 premiere of Comedy Dynamics coming to the stage, which you host. Season 4, so clearly something's being done right here.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I love the idea of new comedians, and I also love the idea of messing them up with my awkward introductions. I try to trick them.
Thanks. That's really
I
nice.
tried to prank every comedian by either telling one of their jokes before I brought them up or staying on stage after I brought them up and making faces behind them. But I don't want people to think I'm really serious about that. That was a joke. But it was a lot of fun because I'm able to be, if you want to say I have a career, I'm at the part of my career where I really feel it only took 30 years, but I'm starting to feel comfortable. I feel like I can pay the bills. So it's just fun to see people starting. It's like, and I never believe in hierarchy in comedy. So I never liked it when comics would be like, try to make the new guys wear beanies or, go through hazing. So I like being around new comics.
Andy, I look forward to catching up with you next week, and it's the alternative show. I guess, it's funny because it sounds like such a 90s reference, the alternative show. You could almost rename it the grunge show, so to speak, right? Like you're the grunge comic, right?
Well, I have thought about adding a mosh pit, so that might work out perfectly. I would love there to be people like slam dancing right in front of the stage. Not really. I don't want to encourage anything.
Everybody can wear plaid as well, Andy.
Yeah, I know I will be.
There you go. You'll fit right in here on the West Coast. Andy Kindler, alternative show coming up February 24th and 25th at the Rio Theatre, all part of JFL Northwest. Andy Kindler, thanks so much for doing this.
You got it. This was fun.